Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm very fortunate to have Dr. Hoffman on a video interview today. Dr. Anthony Hoffman, he's an oncologist out of New York City, the Bronx to be specific. And we're going to be bringing you a series of videos talking about all kinds of things related to oncology. And we're going to really dive deep into this rabbit hole over the next course of several video series. But in this one, I wanted to make it more of a introduction. Who is Dr. Hoffman? There's a lot of other researchers watching. First of all, we're going to explain what a clinical research study actually is. We're going to focus specifically on people interested in oncology, maybe current oncologists that have not done research, or CRAs that want to get into oncology. There's a lot we can learn from you, Dr. Hoffman. So thank you, first of all, for being on today.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
Good, thank you. So I appreciate your time, and why don't you give us a little bit of background as to who you are, how you got started in medicine, and then we'll get into how you got started in clinical research as well.
Very good. The passion for clinical medicine started in a laboratory of where we studied retrovirology in San Francisco at UCSF.
Hmm.
I was working in the lab of Dr. Jay Levy, who was doing work on something called retroviruses, which are RNA viruses, which are well described in all kinds of animals, but not so much in humans. And in fact, the retroviruses is where the oncogene idea came from. And that was between 1980 and 1985. And during that time, unfortunately, we had the HIV started, and we were at the epicenter. And so we ended up studying, we found the HIV because the HIV has a similar system of replication, which uses an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. And therefore, we were doing those assays already for cells in other systems. And we detected this activity, and that's the story with HIV. But this process of research in the lab is what really motivated me for the next 37 years, to ask questions about all the things that we do in medicine and in oncology specifically. Because if you think about it, for many, many years we had 2 or 3 drugs that we use for several types of cancers. And then over the last 10 years or so, there was this whole armamentarium of new medications that have come out, what we call targeted agents, and biological agents like the monoclonal antibodies, like Herceptin and Avastin, these type of medications. And these have enlarged the toolbox that we use to treat cancer. And each one of these new drugs, since we were able to help more people, the more people we help, the more it is rewarding to practice oncology, obviously. So we want lots of medications and help as many people as possible, naturally. So and oncology is a very special place to do research because of the fact that we are still not curing everybody, obviously, nowhere close. So the status quo is unacceptable. We need to ask questions, and we need to ask complex questions and try to come up with answers to help real people. So that has taken on a life of its own when the idea of of the immune system being involved in the development of cancer, and possibly as a way um, to treat cancer, that revamped the whole field of oncology. It gave it a new charge, a new enthusiasm and excitement.
Mm-hmm.
The as you know, immunotherapy started really with in melanoma, and if you talk to doctors who take care of patients with melanoma, they're very, very, very sad doctors, because in the old days, melanoma was basically a death sentence. And the fact that you were able, with a novel medicine like Yervoy, to basically save a third of the patients affected by this disease.
Mm-hmm.
President Carter former President Carter is an example of such patients who had actually the melanoma had spread to the brain, and despite that, he was cured by these immunotherapy drugs.
Immunotherapy.
Immunotherapy drugs, yes. So since immunotherapy is based on the immune system and it's based on real cells, and you have to understand what the different type of cells, the different elements of the immune system, how they work. And since retrovirology is basically based on, the immune system is very important in retrovirology, because obviously it's not just the function of the virus, but it's also the host reaction to the virus, which causes the disease state. So one of the retroviruses in one of the mice, for instance, causes a disease very similar to lupus, because of the fact that the virus looks a little bit like the kidneys of the mouse, and therefore the mouse starts to attack the kidneys and other organs in the body. Therefore, the immunotherapy and oncology, they become even more important to somebody like me, who at one time was in a laboratory, because there is a lot of laboratory language, that becomes relevant when we talk about immunotherapy. And what's also very interesting is the fact that as we become, we are basically learning about immunotherapy. It's the way I look at it is that we're at the beginning of a long cycle where we're going to be expanding lots of therapeutics in this field, and even look back and see some of the old medications that we use, perhaps, say, for instance, for high blood pressure, and learn that these drugs may have an effect on the immune system. And therefore, maybe we may be able to use in combination an antibody, say, and a blood pressure medicine, or an antibiotics, perhaps. So the complexity of the immune system, the fact that today we are able to grow cells or antibodies, any type of biological therapy, or say vaccines, patients' own tissue-made vaccines. They basically, the doctor becomes kind of like the plumber. He's the real, as opposed to just prescribing medication. You theoretically could be in a situation where you have lots of tools, and for each one of the patients, you need to understand what is the best combination. And
now
therefore,
oh, sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say, you have a private practice, Hoffman Oncology. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
Yes,
you're also
correct.
involved in research.
Yes.
And I think, and it's one of my theories, it's actually the thesis of my CRO being built on top of, we need, in order to improve clinical research participation for subjects, in order to increase recruitment and retention, we need more research-naive physicians to get involved in research. So, where do you see that? right now with oncology studies, are you seeing a lack of enrollment, slow enrollment?
Absolutely. The For instance, the medical center that's in this area, in 2015, they were enrolling 10% per year on their studies, which is shocking, but it's not far off from the national averages.
So
What you
10% of
what
capacity
they
or of
needed, yeah,
goals? Okay.
10% of what they were expected to enroll. And the and I think that one of what you just said is a very important thing, which is um, the research in clinical practice is best probably done in a private setting, in a community, not necessarily private, but in a community setting, in a setting where the physician is a caring physician, as opposed to an environment that is strictly academic, where the physicians may be caring, but their involvement perhaps in the lives of the patient is a little bit sheltered by nursing staff, residents, and junior staff, and medical assistants. The attending physician in a clinic spends 3 to 4 minutes with the patient, and then the rest of the time is spent with everybody else, the patient navigator, the patient, the phlebotomist,
Yeah.
lots of people spending time with the patient, but the doctor. And the doctor is really needs to communicate the value of research. The days of blinded therapeutics is probably. I'm not saying it's over. There are still going to be randomized studies, but perhaps there are going to be what we've seen in the recent past, which is drug, effective drug plus or minus research drug. Or, for instance, some of these more complicated study designs where we are looking for a marker, and then that particular patient gets a specific drug. These mosaic type of studies where you have lots of different options based on the attributes of the patient. So basket trials is an example of that, right?
Basket? Okay.
Basket
Can you
trials.
explain that to the
You have a whole basket of different therapeutic options, and it will depend on for instance, in the example of the example I'm thinking of is lung cancer with different type of targeted agents for specific mutations that are found in lung cancer patients more often than other patients. So, we have in lung cancer now, they have lots of what they call small molecules, which are all tyrosine kinase inhibitors.
TKA?
And
Yeah.
TKA, yeah. And these medicines they only work in that mutation. So if you can identify the patient with the mutation, then you can treat the patient with that drug. And that's an example. I hope it's an example of a basket trial. We
Okay.
can always edit that. But it's the idea of being able to try many different things in one patient population. Also, that's another way to do a trial,
Is
as
that
opposed to.
unique? That's unique to oncology, right?
Very much so, yes, very much so. Because say, for instance, you want to sequence a patient through different drugs. If the patient progresses over study drug 1, then you enroll them into study drug 2. So you don't have to redesign the study, so you can save. The idea that we do randomization of thousands of patients where we compare combination A to combination B to only find out that there is a 5% or a 3% statistical significance at a p level of 0.01 may be very good for the statisticians and the people who are excited about these kind of studies, but they really have not added a great deal of cure rate to just discovering the drugs. In other words, if you take a taxane, Adriamycin, Cytoxan. You can have different permutations how you use them. There are definitely differences whether or not you use them together, one following the other, or two together and then another one. But at the end of the day, these differences are not that it's not 0 versus 30%, like for instance, with a checkpoint inhibitor, or say Herceptin, the drug against breast cancer that targets HER2/neu. That was the first biological agent against cancer. That was the first or second. And that drug, in patients who carry the HER2 mutation, has an activity level of over 70%, right? So you have the need to be able to identify only the patients with the mutations. Now, if you need to collect 3,000 of that one mutation, it becomes a very long and expensive process. But if you can test all of them at once, then you cut down on the expense. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we hear about all the time is how expensive drugs are. Well, I mean, just the clinical trials alone, if you look at the classical large institutional CROs, without mentioning names, their cost per patient is probably 5 to 8 times what the actual cost of running the study is. And on top of that, because of many requirements, first of all, safety concerns, and then the concern about having enough statistical power so that you are able to get approval for that indication to sell the drug, you need to end up doing studies with thousands of patients at, mm-hmm. 50, 100, $150 million per study. That
it adds up. Adds up quickly.
It adds up.
So, if any oncologist is watching, and they want to get involved in research, what would you recommend? How do they start? So
I think that a lot of oncology practices shy away from research.
Why? Why do they do that?
They're afraid. They're afraid of expenses. They're afraid of having to impose on themselves more work. The reason why some of these large organizations have grown so quickly, these networks of oncologists, is because in many ways, besides handling the back office aspect of the practice, which no doctors today wants to do anymore. Everybody has given up on trying to run a business. But besides that, these large networks have the resources to be able to differentiate the practice, either whether it's research or radiation, or the ability to provide complementary treatments or supportive type of treatments. For instance, I would love to have an acupuncturist in the office. It's not reimbursed, and it costs money, and it's complicated. But the physicians are scared. They are not familiar with the language that's involved in clinical research. All the different words, CRAs, CROs, CMI, SAP, PPD. It's a whole new language.
It's intimidating.
Intimidating. So I think that, reaching out, I think that there are people like yourself, for instance, who have understood the needs of all the different players, right? The needs of the physician, the needs of the pharmaceutical, the needs of the sites, and everybody needs something. And as opposed to one person draining the resources, if those resources are spread around, not in a communist type of way, I'm talking more about in a fair way, you spread out according to who's doing all the work, So the physician obviously takes care of the patient. They need to be compensated for the research. So reaching out to an organization like yours, for instance, would be a fantastic way to start. And then being able to us, it made all the difference 20 years ago when we brought in-house a person full-time dedicated to getting everything done. So when we started out, we were only
Study
doing
coordinator?
a study coordinator, a site management or a coordinator, a CR. She was kind of like a little bit of everything. Um, she being a physician, she still is, but my wife I'm talking about.
Okay.
She's a pathologist, and after the children, she didn't want to have a 5 days a week work, so she came and learned all about clinical trials. Took certification from
Socra,
and
yep.
Socra, and I think a couple of other places.
I recommend everyone do that. You need 2 years of experience prior to taking those exams. So I know people watching right now on Instagram are interested in that. We have a lot of future CRAs or current CRAs watching, and once this goes on YouTube, a lot of people are going to be interested in following in your wife's footsteps, actually, of starting out as a coordinator, getting certified, and then being promoted to running a clinic, right? And then you can do so many more things after that. It's just people don't understand that you just need to get started, because this industry is always in demand, especially oncology. I mean, every year it's the number one largest indication in all of research by far. And same with the budgets too. It's number one all the time.
100%. I think that I think this is a very important project that you're doing, because I think that the more there is no monopoly in this, especially now. I think that what we need now is, first of all, we need to bring a lot of the doctors who have left community-based practices to come back.
How do we do that?
Patients.
And why? Let's go with why first. Why?
Well, why? Because I think that the physicians, once they go and become a 9 to 5 doctor, they lose the enthusiasm, they lose the intensity, the emotion of doing medicine and asking questions. So we want to have doctors that are. I see the doctor as a family member, not as a jack in the box. Maybe I'm the only person in the country that sees that way, but I know patients like it.
You're not. The one thing I recommend, and we have through my consulting company, there's a lot of doctors, and lately a lot of oncologists have been reaching out. And, I tell them, well, get started as a sub-investigator first. Okay?
Right.
All the responsibility is on the PI, not you. And you can dip your toe in the water and then figure out, hey, it's not that cold after all, and then get deeper into it. And what a lot of physicians don't understand is when they hear of research, they think it's like a full-time job. And yes, it can be a full-time job like it is in your case, right? Although you have a hybrid model where you do research and private practice, Hoffman Oncology, but you can be as involved as you want to be. It's not you're not mandated. All the FDA and GCP mandates is you have safety oversight and PI oversight.
Right.
Right.
If I remember correctly, when I started out after I left Memorial, just the first year in practice, the Lilly pharmaceutical pharmaceuticals sometimes have these phase 3 studies where they're looking at long-term safety or something like that.
Yep.
And they do it in a way to market to look at post-approval safety. And basically, it's just giving gemcitabine to patients. I remember pancreatic cancer patients, and collecting the data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the type of study that is very rewarding, but it's obviously you're using a drug you're familiar with. At that time, actually, gemcitabine had just come out onto the market. and you get a chance to learn about the forms, how you enter data. You have a monitor that comes every 3 to 4 weeks, and therefore it's not scary.
And you get to learn what a coordinator is. Don't be those doctors that take on the entire study and want to do every single aspect, including data entry. I know some doctors that do this. They do everything, including data entry, which is like a, depending what state you're in, $12 to $15 an hour job, right? I
Right,
mean, don't do that. You
right,
have people that are study coordinators. You have research assistants. You even have medical assistants that can do data entry. It's just a matter of training them, like you did, bring in a site director and have them help you manage. That way you can do what a physician is supposed to do in a clinical research, which at the end of the
exactly,
day is safety oversight.
right. And the once the leap from that kind of low level activity to more complicated studies is actually pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And once you are able to overcome that initial timidity, say, you want more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every oncologist needs to bring research into there. And I think that it's easy to set up small networks of oncologists, like-minded oncologists, even if they're not in the same area, to be able to, because the whole point about studies is to be able to get them done quickly, and get on with the next study. The sponsor or the CRO loves to be able to get the things done. So, there is a break point of size where the network becomes too big and too much like a institution, and then it loses that element of speed and um, uh, stealth. So, a small network, small collections of sites in an area, as you are doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're having certain sites in an area. That's a fantastic way to bring more trials, and you can have one of the physicians or rotate. One of the physicians can be in charge of making sure things are getting done.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. Now, as we wrap up, and for anyone watching, we're gonna get into so much more in future videos. I know you're interested in exosomes. We're gonna talk more about immunotherapy, and Hoffman Oncology will have a blog. Excella Bio has its own blog. A lot of the videos will be featured on both sites. Podcast, they'll go on my YouTube channel as well, the ones that I think relate to the audience. Um, we have a lot of people interested in becoming study coordinators, so non-physicians, right? Maybe they're foreign trained physicians, or science degrees, but no non-physicians, and they want to get into research, and naturally they all want to get into oncology because that's where the biggest money is. That's where they pay the highest salaries in research. And
And it's
so,
also the most exciting area right now.
most
There's so much
exciting
going on. Yeah.
and most difficult too, as far as like from
Yeah.
a regulatory paperwork perspective, everything much more difficult. SAEs, I mean, if you want to talk about oncology studies, the SAEs of a regular study compared to one patient in an oncology study, you can pretty much take all the SAEs from every site of every subject in most trials,
That's right.
and it will be
That's right.
one binder in an oncology study. Right? Maybe
Right.
that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too far.
Not too far. Maybe so. We should bring my wife to speak one day
Yeah, we'll
to
have her
see.
come on as well.
Yeah,
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 that way we can get the
that would be
perspective
nice.
from there. But what do you recommend to these researchers that don't have oncology experience, but want to get involved? I always say start as a study coordinator.
Yeah, the study coordinator is a good entry level for sure. And there are plenty places that are hiring. I mean, I looked up on Indeed.com, and there is
They
so
can't
many.
fill the jobs. They can't. There's too many jobs. They can't even fill them all. So,
That's right.
let's go with a handful of the most important skills that you need to be a oncology coordinator or CRA? Because they're pretty much the same thing. So what are some of the things,
Well,
the
I,
traits?
I, I think that's the you have to be well organized. That's that's a skill that some people have and some people don't have. Because the binders need to be very neat. You need to be able to find the papers. You need to know what's going on. It's not something you write on a scrap of paper and then you just put in. So organization skills is very important, and also the doctor relies very much on the coordinator to kind of take care of the patient. Once the doctor says, we have this study of this medicine, I think it's very important, you should get on it. Then, let me call Jennifer over, and she'll explain you and give you the consent form. There's a lot of delegation. Obviously, you have explained the consent before. Naturally, you've gone through every page and in details. But I'm saying the actual document, the signature, as it were, you've gone through a lot of it, very much. But then you need another person to go through it again.
It falls into the coordinator's lap.
Yeah.
Basically, the majority of the work falls into the coordinator's lap.
That's right.
And
that's
CRAs
right.
too. I mean, poor CRAs that have to go monitor all these SAEs.
Pobrecito. That's good.
So they deserve. I think they deserve their high salary for. In my opinion, oncology CRAs don't get paid enough.
What are you seeing on average? What is the salary that you're seeing around
150, 150K a year. I think they need to get like 250. There are some that do. If you're an independent contractor and you have several different contracts, you can make that much. 300, you're kind of pushing it, like your max, at least right now in 2018. But I think they should get paid a lot more than that. Just my opinion. It's just a lot of work, and it takes a certain. I think you need to be passionate about oncology to some extent, because that's what's gonna get you through the grueling tasks that you have to go through. Is, hey, what's the bigger picture? Why are you doing this? It has to boil down to some kind of passion that you have,
right,
or just some kind of interest that you have, like in the science, or find something. And if that's not the case, don't even do it, because you're gonna burn yourself out.
I see some coordinators really like the interaction with patients also. There is that aspect. They may not have a nursing background, but they probably should have become a nurse, but didn't. They have this caring attitude about them. It's very nice. I mean, in some ways, while the patient is on the trial, a CRA can become very involved in the care. Because, for instance, in our office, the patients have their cell phone number, and they'll call the CRA before they call me.
Right.
They bond, and it's another member of the team taking care, and without, obviously you don't want to now, because you have more people, less time for the doctor. Not at all.
Right.
It's more time for the doctor and new time for another person.
More proactive time for the doctor.
More
I think
proactive.
A better use of their time.
So overall more face time with patients from the practice point of view, and that translates also in a way the care is better. The patients know that this is a place where people pay attention.
Yep.
Because from their experience, they got so much attention, right? It doesn't mean that every patient in the office gets that much attention, but from the patient point of view, if they have to, if let's say, for instance, they only came for the trial, they'll walk away from this saying, "Oh my goodness, the doctors over there everybody was so nice, so caring. We spent hours together.
Right.
Now I came back to this office, it's terrible. I only see the physician once a month for 20 minutes."
And there's a whole group, and we're going to get into this in other interviews, because there's going to be a lot. There's a whole podcast. Just go to hoffmanoncology.com, Excel bio. We'll have links underneath this video. Sign up to the email list. on both and subscribe to the podcast. If you're interested in oncology, there's no content out there as far as oncology and clinical research combined. There's no podcast, there's no YouTube videos. So this is really going to be the first, Dr. Hoffman, but we're going to get into e-patients. These are there's a whole movement around e-patients, and they're big on Twitter too. These are patients who are either currently battling cancer or survivors. Okay, and these people are experts in research. I mean, they know the latest studies that are out. They know the latest results the minute they go publish on clinicaltrials.gov. And I think we need more of these patient ambassadors to help. And big pharma like Eli Lilly is paying attention. They're actually engaging some of these patients to help them design their studies for better retention, for better recruitment. And so we can get into some of that as well in future interviews. But I'm just excited about this series that we're about to do. We're going to talk about exosomes, immunotherapy, inefficiencies in oncology studies. But I think this was a good introduction for everyone and a good first episode for Hoffman Oncology. And we'll also feature this on Excel Bio. And one is more patient and physician facing, Hoffman Oncology. Excel Bio is more pharma facing, but there's a lot of overlap. And for those ones, I think I will include the content on both. So
Very good.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. I'm looking forward to doing more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan.
And people are going to love this because they love oncology. And
I also do love oncology. And
I would hope so, but yes, you absolutely do. And stay tuned, everyone, for more. We're going to have more announcements, lots more about oncology, everything you ever wanted to know. Just stick with us. Dan and Dr. Hoffman from Hoffman Oncology, and in this case, Excel Bio as well. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.